Okay, let's unpack this. Look, I want you to step outside today, April 30th, 2026. Just look at the roads, look at the fuel pumps.
Yeah, it's pretty grim out there right now.
It is entirely grim. The Strait of Hormuz is essentially a dry pipe. Oil is sitting at, what, $150 a barrel? And we are about to find out exactly how much of our tech and manufacturing industry was just, well, a very expensive mirage.
Right, because we are finally hitting the wall of physical reality. I mean, for the last decade, we lived in this sort of illusion that you can just software update your way out of a crisis.
Just patch the bug and move on.
Exactly. But a dry oil pipeline doesn't care about a slick UI dashboard. It just doesn't.
And that is exactly the core of our mission today. We are looking past the beautifully designed pitch decks to confront the terrifying physical reality of India's tech and manufacturing sectors.
Absolutely.
We're diving into a stack of brutal audit documents and a massive master thesis titled The Hormuz Realignment. And I'm telling you, the vibe of this briefing is urgent. It's like an elder brother giving you a serious reality check, because the era of fake it till you make it is officially dead.
It's completely dead. Because, look, you can fake user acquisition metrics.
Sure, you can buy those.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you cannot fake thermodynamics. In this new reality, physical resilience is literally the only currency that matters.
Yeah.
And the author of these audits, they strip away all the corporate PR that has been shielding this terrible hardware.
Yeah.
So we are simply laying out the structural and economic math that these sources present.
Right, and the most jarring place to start is the most visible symptom of this crisis. So I want you to picture a massive, immaculate showroom in Biwadi.
Oh, this visual is striking.
It really is. The lighting is pristine. Sitting on the floor are 40 state-of-the-art electric scooters. I mean, they look incredible, but they are gathering dust. Nobody is buying them, and the ones that actually were sold are being abandoned because the underlying hardware is fundamentally failing.
It's basically the perfect visual for the modern EV ecosystem, because all those scooters carry a proud, massive, made in India tag. But the audit calls that tag exactly what it is. It's a mukata.
A mukata, a mask.
Just a mask, exactly.
I mean, when you strip away the plastic fairing and the Bluetooth mobile app, what are you actually looking at? The absolute heart of the machine, right? The high-density battery cells, the internal motors, the highly refined rare earth neodymium magnets. It is 100% imported from the Shanghai Jiangsu manufacturing belt.
Every single piece.
We aren't engineering a vehicle. We are essentially just buying a giant, dangerous Lego set someone else designed and snapping it together.
And we really have to look at the economic mechanism of that mukata. Because every time an Indian brand buys those core parts, we are directly funding Chinese scientists' research and development.
Wow.
We are paying for their metallurgical labs.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, our own B-Tech graduates, the mechanical and electrical engineers who should be designing these stators and rotors.
Well, ones we are so proud of producing.
Exactly. They are reduced to gig labor. They are out there delivering food for Zomato in 52 degrees Celsius heat, riding the very scooters they should have been hired to invent.
That visual is just, it's brutally sad. Because we've heard the term demographic dividend thrown around for years, right?
Oh, constantly.
This idea that our massive army of young talent would just naturally propel us forward. But looking at the actual supply chain, it's not a dividend. It is a massive doka.
It really is a betrayal.
A total betrayal of a generation's engineering potential. But hold on, I have to push back here for a second. The math doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, these founders aren't stupid. They went to elite institutes. They have access to massive capital. Why would they deliberately build a hollow company?
Because of a financial mechanism the documents call the last fool principle.
The last fool principle.
Right. These founders operate on a pure Dalal Street mentality. They never actually set out to build a resilient generational physical product. That takes decades of hard work.
Yeah, and patience.
Which they don't have. Their entire business model is to import cheap components, assemble them as fast as possible, sell them at a massive loss, just to show a parabolic growth chart to venture capitalists, and then run for a massive IPO exit.
So the product itself is literally irrelevant.
Completely irrelevant.
It's just an instrument to pump the valuation, cash out, and leave retail investors and local component suppliers holding the bag when the hardware inevitably starts breaking.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how that highly individualized corporate greed aggregates into a massive geopolitical trap for the entire nation.
Right, because if you pull the camera back from that one dusty showroom in Biwadi, you realize this doka has strategically cornered the whole country.
It has. The sources describe India's current geopolitical reality as a Chatarfagera,
A Shatarfagera,
Yeah.
a four-sided siege.
a complete siege. Just look at the macroeconomic reality right now. On one side, we are bleeding foreign exchange, buying incredibly expensive oil from OPEC just to keep our logistics running.
At $150 a barrel now.
Right. So the government pushes a green transition to, quote-unquote, save money.
Oh.
But because we didn't do the hard work of building domestic technology from the ground up, we just shift that absolute dependency.
We just trade one master for another.
Exactly. We go from buying oil from the Middle East to buying battery cells and solar plates from China.
A Shatarfagera.
Yeah.
We are completely surrounded by dependencies, and the audit makes it clear this isn't just happening in the civilian EV sector.
No, not at all.
It draws this brutal parallel to the defense sector. The mechanics are exactly the same. Our defense is effectively on rent. Think about it. The Indian Air Force cannot actually trust our domestic fighter jets without importing US GE 404 engines to propel them.
Right.
And we had to spend billions buying French Rafales because our own domestic cavalry jet engine project has been stuck in development hell for decades.
And we need to explain why that is. I mean, why is a jet engine so hard to build?
It's not just coding.
It's the furthest thing from software.
Mm.
A jet engine operates at internal temperatures that are actually higher than the melting point of the metals used to build it.
Which is wild to even think about.
Right. To survive that, you need incredibly advanced metallurgy. We're talking single crystal turbine blades, microscopic cooling channels. It requires a mastery of material science that takes decades of failure to perfect.
And we just didn't do it.
We didn't invest in that deep material science. So whether it's a scooter in Biwadi or a jet fighter on a tarmac, the core propulsion is foreign.
So we have to ask a brutally honest question to you listening right now. If we cannot forge the metallurgy for a reliable cycle engine and we cannot build a functional jet engine, how on earth can we walk around claiming to be a Vishwa guru?
Yeah, it doesn't hold up.
How can we be the teacher to the world when we can't even forge our own tools?
It's a really harsh reality check. And the thesis argues that we have to fundamentally change the language we use to describe our situation. Policymakers constantly talk about using foreign technology as a temporary support.
Like a crutch.
Right, but the author warns us to stop using the word Baisakhi. These are not crutches we can just throw away when we feel better. We are surviving on Udhar ki Sansing,
Borrowed breaths.
borrowed breaths. Because we lack true, ground-up engineering sovereignty, Jerubah and Unke Hathmain, our callers are entirely in their hands. They don't just support our green revolution, they completely control the valve.
Udharki-sansein. If they stop shipping those highly refined rare earth magnets tomorrow, our entire manufacturing line freezes.
Immediately.
So let's bring this down to the street level. Here's where it gets really interesting. What happens when you take this fundamentally flawed Chinese-dependent hardware, rushed to market by founders chasing an IPO, and you force it into India's brutal physical environment?
You get a catastrophic collision with the laws of physics. That's what happens. Let's look at the electrical grid. These startup pitch decks confidently projected putting 600 million EVs on Indian roads.
Which looks fantastic on a PowerPoint slider.
Oh, investors love it.
But let's apply the actual thermodynamics of a 48 to 52 degrees Celsius Indian summer day. The neighborhood power grid is already at its absolute thermal breaking point, just keeping baseline air conditioning running.
Exactly. Let's break down the actual mechanism here. A neighborhood transformer is sitting in the blazing sun all day long. The cooling oil inside it is already cooking.
Just baking.
Right. At 6 p.m., everyone comes home from work. The ACs kick on. The grid load hits 95%. Now, imagine millions of people simultaneously plugging in 7-kilowatt fast chargers for their EVs.
The math just doesn't work. We aren't getting a green revolution. The thermal limits are breached, the oil boils over, the windings shorted out, and we get cascading, violent transformer meltdowns across entire city blocks.
It's literally a mathematical impossibility to handle that load spike without completely tearing up and rebuilding the underlying power generation and distribution infrastructure.
Which we haven't done.
No. And the crisis isn't just the grid melting outside. The vehicles themselves are melting from the inside.
Yeah.
Because of a total lack of rigorous quality control and thermal management, these heavily hyped EVs are experiencing thermal runaway. They are spontaneously catching fire in the middle of traffic.
Because lithium-ion chemistry is incredibly volatile at those temperatures if the battery management system isn't perfectly engineered, which is why I call these things tutti frutti cheetah.
Moving
They are
pyres.
moving pyres.
Right.
You're essentially sitting on top of a highly combustible chemical experiment.
And society is reacting to that danger in real time. The audit notes that resident welfare associations, the RWAs, in dense urban areas like Gurugram, they're officially banning basement EV chargers. They understand the building physics. A lithium fire burns so hot and so fast that it can literally destroy the structural concrete integrity of an entire high-rise building.
Which brings up a very stark reality for the consumer. If you cannot safely park your car in your own house, it is not a vehicle.
No.
It is a liability.
A massive financial and physical liability. And you see the financial rot catching up to the physical failure, too. Look at the case study of BlueSmart, which was paraded as the absolute darling of the EV charging and cab sector.
Everyone was talking about them.
Right. But the documents detail their collapse into the NCLT for insolvency proceedings, amid serious allegations of financial irregularities. These shiny, heavily marketed startups are completely hollowing out from the inside.
And what's maddening is contrasting that rot with how actual legacy engineering leaders operate. The audit brings up Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford. When a competitor like Xiaomi releases a new vehicle, the SU7, Farley actively imports it and drives it himself for months to study the engineering tolerances.
Yeah, he gets his hands dirty.
Exactly. Meanwhile, our local founders are chauffeured around in imported luxury SUVs. They don't even drive the dangerous, unoptimized products they're pushing onto the public.
Because they view the product as a financial instrument, not a mechanical reality. They are completely disconnected from the mechanical stress their own machines are failing under.
But this brings us to a massive contradiction. If the cars are literal moving pyres and the grid is melting, who exactly is designing this technology? I mean, we are constantly bragging about our education system producing millions of brilliant engineers every single year.
And the audit does not hold back on this front at all. It puts institutions like Galgocia's and LPU right under the microscope. It describes them essentially as degree-Wally factories.
Degree-Wally factories, just churning them out.
Exactly. They operate on a mass-market hoarding culture. It's all about massive billboard advertising, celebrity endorsements, and creating an artificial admissions frenzy.
It's entirely packaging over forging. It's the exact opposite of rigorous Bauhaus engineering, where form actually follows function and materials are pushed to their absolute limits.
Right.
They're selling an incredibly expensive dream to the middle class, but producing almost zero physical inventions that can actually survive the Indian environment.
And to artificially inflate their national rankings, to look prestigious on paper to government regulators, these universities mandate their faculty to file thousands of patents.
Oh, we've seen this.
But the audit pulls the data on these. They are ratty. They are academic scrap.
Ratty, just completely useless paper.
Precisely. They file patents for things like a smart mud guard or an IoT-enabled dustbin.
Oh.
Things with a negligible grant rate and absolutely zero industrial utility. They do nothing to reverse our massive trade deficit or solve complex metallurgical problems.
Hold on, let me stop you there because the math still doesn't add up for me. We graduate over 1 million engineers a year. Just by the sheer laws of probability and volume, shouldn't someone in that massive pool be building a working, resilient motor? Doesn't the sheer scale eventually yield a breakthrough?
This raises an important question about what is actually happening inside those classrooms. Because the thesis dismantles the idea of volume equaling innovation. It calls this phenomenon innovation inflation.
Innovation inflation.
Right. We have business and engineering being taught by faculty who have never spent a single day practicing in a harsh commercial industrial environment. They aren't teaching students how to manage thermal stress in a battery pack. They are teaching students how to design a slick UI for an app or how to pitch a narrative to venture capitalists.
So they're creating a workforce highly optimized for software and marketing, but entirely incapable of building a resilient, functional, physical machine.
Exactly. We have an education system selling a dream, founders selling an IPO exit, and foreign suppliers holding our collars. And now, the $150 oil crisis has shattered the entire digital illusion. We are completely out of time.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the disease, and it's brutal, but We have to look at the cure. What is the actual path forward to protect the Indian citizen? How do we survive this massive economic storm?
The only viable path outlined in these documents is a complete ruthless pivot to the FMH model.
Foundation mobility hardware. Unpack the mechanics of that for us.
Okay, so the author positions the FMH model as a sovereign Kila, a fortress of stability.
A sovereign Kila. I like that.
An FMH company operates on fundamentally different physics than a tech startup. It isn't bleeding cash and looking for a quick exit. It is a hardcore, heavy metal industrial business built from the ground up to protect the dealer network, the factory floor worker, and the end user during the massive economic storm we are entering right now.
So it's not about hypergrowth or dominating a market share graph. It's entirely about Khud Mukhtari. True. Absolute sovereignty over what you forge, build, and sell. It prioritizes the survival and physical mobility of the salaried middle class rather than enriching a founder looking to cash out.
And the most hopeful part of this thesis is that we are actually already seeing the labor market react to this reality.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The documents track a massive ongoing shift called the juniors migration.
Who is migrating where?
The top-tier engineering talent, the really brilliant minds who were honestly wasting their careers designing UI dashboards for failing EV startups. They are looking at the moving pyres and the collapsing valuations, and they are fleeing.
Getting out while they can.
They are returning to the legacy engineering heavyweights, brands like TVS, Bajaj, and Mahindra.
They are trading the volatile adrenaline of a pitch deck startup for the stability of actual steel.
Because those legacy brands are on a mission to build machines with 80 to 90% domestic content.
Let's pause on that. 80 to 90%, that is massive. That means actual decoupling from the Chinese choke point. That means rethinking the chemistry to use materials we actually have, forging our own high-tensile steel, and winding the copper stators right here. That is the literal definition of building a sovereign Kila. But here is the critical problem. How do we get there efficiently? Because in this $150 oil environment, capital is incredibly expensive. We don't have endless billions to just throw at R&D.
We don't. But we have a blueprint for how to win under severe constraints, and ironically, it comes from the software world.
Oh, interesting.
The author draws a brilliant, highly detailed parallel to an AI model released this very month, April 2026, called DeepSeek V4.
Oh, I read about DeepSeek. The way they completely upended the AI landscape is fascinating. Break down the actual mechanics of what they did for us.
It's basically a masterclass in extreme efficiency. DeepSeek achieved frontier-level artificial intelligence, meaning it mathematically competes with the absolute smartest models built by Western tech giants.
Right.
But the Western giants were using massive, billion-dollar server farms loaded with the newest, most expensive hardware. DeepSeek couldn't do that. Because of heavy trade restrictions, they were forced to use heavily restricted, older, much cheaper chips.
Right. They were starved of the raw computing brute force.
Exactly. So instead of relying on hardware power, they had to rewrite the fundamental architecture of the neural network. They optimized how the data routed through the system. And by doing that, they achieved top-tier intelligence for just a fraction of the cost of the Western models.
Wow. What the thesis is pointing out is that severe constraints are actually a feature, not a bug. They breed superior engineering.
Precise.
Because you can't just throw raw power or endless capital at a problem. You have to optimize every single variable.
The core mechanical lesson here is that extreme engineering efficiency will always eventually defeat raw capital brute force.
Yeah.
And India has to apply that exact software lesson to our physical manufacturing. We have to use the brutal constraints of the $150 oil crisis, our fragile thermal power grid, and our lack of rare earth metals to force ourselves to become vastly superior mechanical engineers.
We have to.
We have to design EVs that are lighter, that use alternative, safer chemistries like sodium ion, and that require a fraction of the electricity to charge.
We have to engineer our way out of the Chatar era.
Yes.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We've covered an immense amount of ground today, from dusty showrooms hiding in Mukata, to the metallurgical failures of jet engines, to the algorithmic brilliance of DeepSeek. But the ultimate takeaway from this audit is brutally simple.
The physical world always bats last.
It always bats last, and it does not negotiate. You cannot run a slick public relations campaign to refill a dry oil pipeline. You cannot send out a software patch to fix a melted neighborhood transformer. And you certainly cannot fake your way out of a 52-degree heat wave. The era of the Mukata is over. True national sovereignty isn't a trendy hashtag. It is built entirely on mechanical trust, thermodynamic reality, and grid-to-socket honesty.
Which leaves us with one final, deeply unsettling question to mull over as we close out today's briefing.
All right, lay it on us.
We've talked extensively about India waking up from this narrative illusion, but imagine if India and other rugged, developing economies around the world actually execute this blueprint successfully.
Okay.
If they use extreme efficiency to build this 90% localized engineering fortress, if they construct this sovereign Kila, what happens to the entire global balance of power?
Wow.
What happens to the absolute economic dominance of Western and Chinese tech when over 1 billion people suddenly realize they have engineered a reality where they no longer need to buy a single piece of imported hardware to survive? Think about that.